that sounds a lot better on my end. Hopefully it's not echoing for you.
Yeah, no, it's all clear on my end as well.
Yay, perfect. Success.
Right on. Your
Alright,
avatar is
when's
like
my setup trick?
extra expressive. I feel like. Do you have like the hand stuff so you can gesture with the hands?
Yeah, I can do the gestures with the hands. Unfortunately, sitting here, it's gonna be hard because I have the sit button here, and
That's
so she
interesting.
keeps moving up and down. So I'll have to be kind of careful with pressing it.
Yeah, for sure. Did you do the did you develop that yourself or like how I've always wondered how people get like custom avatars like that.
Yeah. So basically, for my avatar, I used something called VRoid Studio, and the way that VRoid Studio works is that it gives you like a preset anime style avatar, and then you can go in and customize the features almost the way you would in like a game like Sims, and then you can like change like the eye shape and change like how big or how tall your avatar is. And then for the hair, you get to go in and do like all of the strands individually. Then you take that model that you create in VRoid Studio, put it into Blender, and then you can do all your like fine tuning adjustments and stuff there, and then upload it to VR chat. So that's kind of what I do.
That's dope. That's dope.
Hmm.
Did you learn how to do like all the Blender stuff through like tutorials and stuff?
Yeah, pretty much. I wish I knew more about Blender and things. I'm definitely not gonna pretend like I'm that much of a pro. I never used Blender or Unity or anything like that before kind of jumping into like the VR VTubing type of stuff. But once I kind of got the hang of it, I can do like the basics and things now. So I'm still not super familiar with the programs, but I can kind of do the basics with getting my avatar in. I even made like a tutorial for people who also use Vroid. And I like to keep it like super friendly to beginners because I think most of the information that's out there is so like limited to specifically people who are already super familiar with like avatar creation and stuff. So it's really hard for new people to jump in without having some nice like beginner tutorial stuff.
Right. Yeah. I was surprised. Like I set out to kind of like make a first like VR chat world, and I was a little kind of intimidated a little bit because it's you look at like some of the amazing worlds that people do, and I'm like, oh wow, that's crazy. But I was pleasantly surprised. I'd say it was extremely straightforward for the most part. I mean, I feel like the VR chat team has made it pretty efficient for someone to just kind of create their own stuff. It's cool.
For sure. I love the amount. I think that's the thing. Like, probably spend more time in like a VR chat than I do like most other VR like applications. And I think that that's the biggest pull for me. Is it reminds me so much of something like Minecraft or just any like sandbox or like DIY kind of creation game where you get to make your own things. And that's such the pull for me. Is I love coming in here and then exploring like worlds that people make, and I think that's so cool, especially when they make things that they've seen like in their dreams or based off of like our favorite media. Like I love the visit Legend of Zelda themed worlds and stuff because I'm a big Zelda fan, and so like exploring all that stuff, it just gets me so excited. I love to spend all this time here and seeing what people come up with. That's the biggest pull for me.
Yeah, 100%. The exploration is super fun. It does almost harken back to
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, sort of the Minecraft days where you could go on like these websites and just see like these hundreds of creations from people's around the world. How did you kind of get started in VR as a whole?
Yeah, so VR as a whole. I always knew like what VR was, but obviously it was always kind of like expensive and stuff back in the 2020 teens. It was a bit of a not a thing like a high school kid could do, without saving up a bunch of money. So I kind of brushed it to the side and didn't care about it that much. But then the reason I discovered it is because I discovered my favorite clothing brand. It's called Cloma. It's this like high fashion Japanese clothing brand, which I'm actually wearing right now in VR. They put together these like virtual reality outfits, and I was like, whoa, like that's so cool. Like my favorite brand has these outfits, and I could wear it virtually because it's very expensive in real life. So I decided that I wanted to make an avatar that was compatible with this program that would do the virtual reality fashion. So I decided to make my VR avatar, and then I was like, okay, now what do I do with this? I spent all this time making it, but what am I gonna do with it? So I tried to find like things that were compatible with the avatar, and I discovered that VR chat you could upload these VRoid Studio avatars. And so I got really excited. I was like, okay, this sounds like something really cool. I can kind of play as myself, play as this model that I've made. And I uploaded it, hopped into VR chat, just playing desktop, and I started exploring all these worlds, and I was like, whoa, like, this stuff is so cool. I wonder what it would be like to actually explore, like, Hyrule in VR, or explore these people's, like, dream worlds, and all these different things. And so I kind of decided from then, from that first time that I played VR chat on desktop, I was like, man, I need to have a VR headset. I need to get my hands on one. And thankfully for me, it was kind of around like Black Friday time, and so they were having sales on like the Oculus headsets. It was like $50 off. So I got my dad, and I was like, "Hey, Dad, like what I really want for Christmas, I think, is gonna be an Oculus." So he's like, "Okay, well we'll pull together like all your Christmas money, and that'll be like the one thing you get." And I was like, "Awesome." And the very first time that I put on that headset, like I like just went through this huge transformation. Like it just completely changed me that, Christmas day, Christmas miracle. And I just started seeing the world in such a different way that I immediately became completely obsessed with it. I became super obsessed with what it represents and, all the developments in technology. And it just feels like reality itself is different because of VR. And that really excites me. And so I started pouring a bunch of time and energy into learning about it and making that my passion.
Yeah, 100%. That mention of sort of the almost it is, it's like opening up the eyes to this different layer of reality. Especially like the when we think of like the implications of VR on like a deeper level, because like right now it's like entertainment, and we can almost use it to like communicate with each other, or create content with each other. And then it's like, okay, how will the world use it further? I think the fashion is definitely an interesting thing. I remember, are you familiar with Grimes?
Yes, I love Grimes.
Yeah, great artist. But it's interesting to see artists like that kind of start to to bring the mainstream media into these different concepts, whether it be like virtual clothing lines and stuff. It's definitely cool.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I love seeing kind of the mainstream, like you said, pick up these things because I think it's kind of inevitable that at some point VR is going to be the mainstream. It is going to be the thing that kind of everybody does, And I think you've talked before about how it's like kind of the new internet, right? Where it's starting off as this kind of niche thing that's slowly growing and slowly kind of going to take over. And it's really exciting because you know that all these people who are picking it up now and putting it into like pop culture, those things are what's going to lead us towards the future. And what those people are putting out there is going to have a huge influence on what actually does happen. Because as these technologies are being developed, the people developing them are looking at looking at this media and looking at this pop culture and kind of internalizing that and subconsciously being influenced by it. So I think it's an important thing to pay attention to what's being put out there and kind of what that means.
100%. I think a lot of the content you've been making is it's been really interesting to kind of see your perspective as like a girl on the internet growing up, going through these different concepts. What to you is like the most interesting thing about VR personally?
The most interesting thing for me, I think, is this kind of idea that I get to exist within another realm. And what's so interesting about that is that I start kind of having these questions about which kind of me is the real me. It's this huge pull because, like I said, for the very first time that I put on a VR headset, it changed me. And the specific moment that I would say that did change was I came into VR chat and I looked into a mirror as my virtual avatar. I looked into a mirror as me. And it was so surreal. Like that moment is kind of like burned into my memory forever. Because looking into the mirror, I didn't see something else. I saw this virtual representation of me. And I highly identify with this body. Like this body is something that I see just as much as an extension of myself as my real physical body is. And it becomes really interesting because we put so much weight on our physical bodies. Like we consider that a part of ourselves. when in reality, like, now I'm having a kind of a swap where I'm putting my embodiment in this virtual avatar, and I start constantly asking myself, is one more authentic than the other? Because I'm still controlling both, I'm still inhabiting both, and I'm still the same me, regardless of what I'm, encapsulating. And I think that's what really gets me excited and really gets me thinking. And it turns a lot of gears in my head to imagine who, like, am I really?
Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting concept because even I think that that idea, at least in a very early form, I think we've kind of seen it in social media, right? Like early days of Facebook or Twitter, MySpace. Like it's so easy to identify with the the little profile image, or the things that we send and type out. But now it's like, oh wow, we actually are embodying that, um, in every sense of the word.
Yeah, exactly. We get to create our own, our virtual selves. We get to create the people that we are. And it's such a contrast to the real world, as we would say. Because you're kind of stuck with your body, you kind of you get what you get, you don't throw a fit kind of a thing. But through VR, we have this total power where you can be whatever you want to be. If you have enough money to, like, pay someone to create you an avatar, that avatar can be the representation of yourself. And you can have whatever hair color you want. You can be like an animal. You don't even have to be a humanoid. Or you can create something totally abstract, like out of your imagination, that you would never physically ever see. And it's such an interesting experience that you get to create yourself. You get to create what you represent yourself with, and what other people interpret you as. And I think it's a lot more authentic in that way, because you're really experiencing the core of someone's being when they get full self-expression to show who they feel they are. And I think it's so much more of an insight into a person and into their personality than you would ever get just walking past someone on the street and seeing what they look like that way.
Mm. I was talking to a friend the other day, and kind of on a similar topic where it's like for the first time we're seeing this like new medium where we're interacting with it in almost the same exact way that we interact with physical reality. So you can, for example, have like a really deep, conversation about like, you know, something super intense with a friend in a world, and then in the background you just see like Shrek walking past. So it's just like, this thing that completely pulls you out of the moment, but also keeps you in the moment
Hmm.
as well. That's interesting. Um,
It is interesting. Yeah.
so like when, because earlier you kind of touched on like we're at the very inception of this technology. So when you imagine like yourself, like what type of content, if you could, like if you could theorize in like 10 years, right? Because you're making videos now, but
Hmm.
if you could, keep making content and make a living from it, like what is your goal?
Yeah, so I have a very kind of specific goal that I have in mind. Like, this is something pretty pretty well thought out, I think, that I've had. Um, but I would specifically love to develop my content into being a full show. So what I have is the virtual reality show, and my gag is like, I'm the girl in virtual reality who talks about anything in virtual reality, and I'd love to extend that not just to aspects of like talking about certain topics, but I'd love to make it into an entire, talk show, or entertainment kind of base where I would be able to bring in guests and bring in multiple forms of entertainment, whether that be like music or comedy sketches, or just having, philosophical discussions. I would love to just pull in all forms of VR into one single kind of hub, almost like you would think like a TV station would be, but kind of take that concept and evolve it into something totally virtual and a totally in virtual like environment. And I think the thing about that, the thing that we don't really get from watching like TV or YouTube channels, you have some sense of interaction, but you don't really have this ultimate interaction. Like, you can't really be there, you can't really experience it. And the thing that's so cool about VR is you could imagine having something simulated in front of you. So, like, we're here in VR right now, Imagine if this as a podcast was being recorded and someone could sit over where the camera is and then watch us and experience that. And I think that's kind of the core of what makes VR so different as far as entertainment goes, is that you get to be there. You get to experience the entertainment. And that's kind of my goal, is to create something that's this really immersive experience for people where they get to engage in the excitement, because I have so much excitement for VR, obviously. And I want to share that with people. I want that to be something that gets them excited and wants, inspires people to innovate and to create and to experience and share and make VR a really positive thing. Because I think technology developments can be really scary, you know? There's all these ifs and buts that come with it. But I think by focusing on positivity and bringing, entertainment in such a bright light, we can use that to create something really beautiful, and that's my goal, is to lead us towards the better future for VR.
That's rad. That's rad. Yeah, I think the style that you've kind of honed in on is definitely unique. I was watching it, and I love like the way you sort of like inhabit the avatar, like you're presenting, bringing your arms around it. It's yeah, it's really well done. Um, the specific one I was watching was the uh, sort of the idea of the brain in a vat, infinite life. I think
Yeah, yeah.
that's such an interesting topic, because like
Mhm.
the ever present myth of the fountain of youth, I think, is like it's almost a it's almost like excuse me. I think there's an element of it that sort of embodies like fool's gold. It's like a fool's errand. But then you think, okay, if we do have the ability now to scan the brain, right, to get
Mhm.
it to a certain level, and then you're adding like artificial intelligence onto that, um, and then you are interacting with the virtual world through a brain, it doesn't seem too far off that
Mm-mm,
we would
not at
be,
all.
not using controllers anymore and smashing
Mhm.
around. It's interesting.
I think, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think for me that's one of the most interesting topics about virtual reality, is this idea that we could live forever, and that's mankind's biggest fear at our very core, right? Is our survival instinct is to stay alive and reproduce. Those are two things. And this idea of eternal life, we theoretically within the future, and I don't know how long all this technology would make. We could see it in our lifetimes. It could be 200 years from now, it could be another 1,000, I don't know. But we know that it's possible. It's something that is coming, and those technologies we see with like Neuralink and all that. We're seeing this human to computer interaction that is being so tightly bonded that we at some point are going to be computers. We are going to be so tied with them that it's going to become really indistinguishable as to what's what. And we're already starting that development, and so it's just so interesting that there is a chance that we will surpass that natural human instinct to be fearful of death. And it brings up, obviously all these questions, all these concerns, what's right, what's wrong. Um, and obviously a lot of those can't really be answered. It just depends on your own personal morals, your personal ethics. But I think it's really exciting. I think for me, that's something that I highly look forward to. I love the idea of becoming fully virtual. And I'd be lying if I said that that wasn't in part some of my goal, is that I want to be fully virtual. I've created this transition for myself that in hopes that one day I can kind of fully envelop, my being into like the cyber world. I think that's something that would be really interesting, and open up all these possibilities to kind of create and great happiness and excitement forever. But it's also a very scary thing. It's a very scary thing, the idea of living forever. But obviously, there's so much to talk about. You can't even fit it all into one conversation, which makes it makes it such a heavy subject. I could make episode upon episode of all the things that come with it. But I'm glad that you took special note of that one, because that's obviously a topic that I'm very, very passionate about.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost one of the I think one of the largest like existential questions, because then, okay, we think we find ourselves inhabiting these two-limbed creatures, and we have a certain amount of time on Earth, and then during the time on Earth, it seems that the people that came before us have, for the large part, attempted to create a set of maps for us to use to navigate into the world. To say, okay, we can use the Christianity map, we can use the Buddhist map, we can use an Icelandic Vikings rune map to navigate. So then it makes me wonder, like, okay, the way I see it is like the ultimate goal for humans would be maybe to get off of Earth, to expand into the skies and the stars. But then once that comes, okay, I think the moral conundrums that we face today would almost transition over. So you'd have, like, tribalism between people or different groups. And also the good, you'd have great parties and stuff in deep space and friends. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but just kind of theorizing on the deep concepts is interesting.
Yeah, I do think, we do have this, kind of trajectory that we are headed towards. We're kind of headed towards like space and stuff, but I also think it's a good thing to imagine, for fun, even just the really long term, right? Is that eventually things will kind of dissipate and end, right? Like eventually there will be like an end to the earth, an end to human, like, kind and all that. But you could almost imagine that we could set up for ourselves this kind of like virtual utopia that we use to almost like escape the end. I think that's totally something that very science fictiony, but also something that could relatively be possible at some point. If things keep developing.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting because there's so many things that you can think about, but we're at such a weird point in time too, where we're just now kind of crossing into this territory where we don't really know exactly which direction things are going to be headed, and it's never going to be anything we expect either. It's always going to go in a in an unexpected way. I think that's just part of being human.
Yeah, it'd almost be
But I
boring
also
if it didn't. If it was just straightforward and we knew exactly where it was heading, and it'd be like, this is let's find a new game.
it's the story of humankind, and we got to make it interesting. So. But yeah, I wanted to touch back on your point too. Well, like talking about like Christianity or Buddhism and these different kind of ways that we perceive the world. I do also see it totally as something that this kind of like virtual simulation kind of mentality is going to start becoming almost like a new religion in a way. I think where people are going to start believing more into like the Matrix or the simulation versus something like a traditional religion and whatnot. And I think it's so interesting to see how like we kind of form belief systems around what we know. And I do think that if what we know is VR, we'll kind of see a change in like the spiritual aspect of humans as well, and it'll be kind of intertwined with the internet as well.
Yeah, 100%. Because like you think, okay, there's, let's say, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, a person born into a specific culture really only had access to their culture's interpretation of reality, right? But now it's like, okay, all of the information is now just a Google click away. It's really the only inhibition towards, or the only roadblock towards learning something is the individual, if they want to learn and put the time in. So yeah, it's I could almost imagine like a specific religion or belief system, either structure of going about the world that's almost based on these symbols that we see, like these fictional symbols that we've seen in books, we've seen in films, or any given medium, but then we'll almost see it like transition and be embodied through the new VR medium.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I think, we kind of love the familiar, and we also love placing like weight on things. We love putting meaning in things. We love as humans to take something and kind of read between the lines, even if there not necessarily is something there. Um And I think it's really interesting too the when you said before that, if you grew up in a certain kind of culture, years ago, you were kind of stuck believing whatever that belief system was because that was like your reality, that was what you knew. But the difference between then and kind of what we're leading into as a society is that you no longer are stuck experiencing a predetermined reality, but you get to create your own reality. And there's such a big difference in that. There's such it's two complete extremes. Something pre-made for you versus something that you get to, manipulate. You can create virtual worlds, virtual avatars, whatever. You get to experience reality however you want. And I think that's going to expose so much of who we are as people at the core. Um, More so than these pre-structured belief systems that we've had throughout, human history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that immediately brings up an additional thought to that is like, okay, I would say that part of growing up is learning how to navigate the world and almost create your own reality, or at the very least create your own foundation for building a life in the physical reality. I think, well, or at least I would hope for, and what I think will happen is, you gotta love just fell off the face of the earth. It's great.
Oh, there you are.
It's great to be able to create a reality where it can fall off into an infinite void in the middle of a conversation.
That's the most exciting part.
It's great, yeah.
I love the infinite void.
Yeah, it's you learn a lot down there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the idea of like, okay, learning how to navigate the physical world can almost, or at the very least, like learning how to manifest the best good in the physical world. That's what I would say is like the goal. So we can almost then imagine ways of manifesting that through VR. Like the biggest example I would think would be like fitness apps. Like I really enjoy like virtual fitness stuff because that's like it's something you can do in virtual, and then it sort of has this benefit in the physical world. It's almost like an effect then that we see where VR is being shaped by obviously the physical world because people are creating it, but then it can also have, I think, an effect on the physical world where it could be a positive for the individual if they seek it out, or it could also be a negative. I think it's almost like a tool.
Definitely. I think, just like any other technology, there's, these really strong pros, but there's also these really strong cons to it. It's a great tool. We totally can use it. I know all the stories of people who played Beat Saber and they lost more weight playing Beat Saber than they did going to the gym, and you can see how it engages people in this new way that can help, their real life situations by using, virtual reality. I did a whole episode on social anxiety and how people can basically use VR chat as like a exposure therapy to learn social interaction in a more realistic way to help them feel less anxious in their day-to-day lives. There's all these great impacts that come from the VR world that can then be taken and applied to the real world as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's just so interesting to see how each one interacts with the other, because I think it is kind of a tendency to see things in black and white and see things as like, oh, something is either virtual or not virtual, but it's very important for me, and kind of like my whole gig that I do is that I'm trying my best to kind of connect the real world to the virtual one by being both like a virtual girl and a real girl right now. And I think it's important to kind of enjoy the journey as we descend into this virtual reality, as we would say.
Yeah, definitely. It's like I think also we're seeing that transition with like a lot of the economy even of the first world country, because you think like, okay, is like YouTube as an example. There's like so much money flowing through YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, but it's like most of that money is just numbers, like on computers. It's not even actual physical paper. But it has an effect on the physical world. So it is like we're right. It's such an amazing time to be alive. Right in the middle of the transition. Pretty cool.
No, I totally love that. I've always felt like really, really lucky because so I was born in the year 2000. And so growing up, I didn't necessarily have a lot of internet access. That was kind of like the beginning of the interwebs. I was, around it, but I didn't have a cell phone until I was in high school. I didn't really have like a ton of virtual interaction, but I had things like my DS and stuff. And so I kind of grew up alongside technology as it developed. And it's only a very specific group of people in time that are going to be able to kind of experience what it was like to grow up as a kid in both kind of the pre-internet age and during kind of the golden internet age. And I think like I'm very thankful for that because kids who are growing up now, they're completely immersed in the virtual, the internet, and they're growing up alongside of it. And then people who are older than me, they didn't really have the internet in the way that we do now. And so things were kind of different in the way they grew up. And so I feel really special in the way that I got to experience kind of both and, see both for kind of what they are and see the differences. I think it's so interesting. And, we, like you said, we're living in this weird in-between age that's so cool. It's so beautiful to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember my parents would put restrictions on my brother and I's usage. It was like, we couldn't use like the TV or the internet, yeah, during the week. But then the weekends were like,
Totally.
wow, yeah, we can dive in. So it's funny.
Hmm.
Um, so how did you kind of get into talking? Like have you always been a performer? Like theater? Did you do theater in high school or anything?
Yes, I did do theater in high school. I was also a cheerleader. People always kind of giggle at that because it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I've always loved talking. That sounds awful. Like I love talking, but I do. My favorite thing was always in school is when teachers would ask us to read. I was never a kid who would raise my hand that much. I didn't really like being too involved in class. I kind of thought it was stupid. But just to spare the other kids of the boringness of somebody reading, like, in their slow, monotone voice, I'd always volunteer. I'd be like, please let me read out of the textbook. Don't do popcorn. Just let me handle it. And people would always come up to me and be like, Sophie, I'm so glad that you got the read today. I mean, it's so much more interesting for me. And so I think this kind of affirmations growing up always kind of fed my, my self-confidence in that way. And so then, once I was in high school and I was doing theater, that gave me a lot more practice to kind of conquer the nerves. Same with cheerleading, is I was literally, doing physical activity in front of a large group of people, which is terrifying for me. But I was able to kind of conquer that and then utilize those skills, because what I do with the virtual reality show is that I basically pull in all of my talents and all of my different skills that I've accumulated over the years and use them together in one kind of conglomerate of, ways. But yeah, I love talking. I love trying my best. Like I said before, like my biggest thing is I just want to bring excitement. I want to bring enthusiasm to VR, and I think I am a very enthusiastic, enthusiastic person. I'm very expressive with my, how much passion I have. And I feel like I'm able to kind of use that to help other people get excited and to be positive about things. And I'm really thankful for that skill, and I hope that I can kind of like utilize that to the max.
Yeah, 100%. Did you get into like any fictional stuff about VR?
I watched like SAO when I was younger, and Ready Player One, stuff like that. Of course, I try my best to kind of read media and stuff when I'm able to, but it's kind of hard for me just because I wasn't interested in it for so long. It wasn't until Christmas that I got my VR headset, which 6 months ago. That really isn't that long of a time. But I tried my best to kind of fill in the gaps with media. I've read a lot more like books and stuff I read this one book. I don't know if you would have ever heard of it, but it was called like Get Real by Philip Zai.
No, I haven't heard
And
that.
that one was from, I'm pretty sure that was like the year 2000 or maybe like a couple years earlier. And it's all about the philosophies of virtual reality. And so I was kind of finding things like that at my college's library and just reading into it and getting really excited. So as far as fiction goes, not necessarily so much. But I'm always trying to kind of fill in the gaps more. My friend got me an Amazon gift card so that I can start watching Ghost in the Shell once I finish up another show that I'm on. So I'm excited for doing things like that. I love fiction too. I'm a big like Narnia, Harry Potter, Star Wars, all that jazz.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, the philosophy books about VR are interesting because it's like how did it's so new that it's almost like we are kind of writing these things as we figure them out, right? All these concepts are so new.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Are there any specific ones that you'd say are the most interesting to your mind right now?
I'm trying to think. I don't know. Jokingly, I want to say Lawnmower Man. That one scarred me for. That one scarred me for life.
It's like, yeah,
The bad
quintessential
CGI.
quintessential cheesy '90s.
That
Yeah,
one really makes you think. Let's just say that. Um,
it's a weird one. Uh,
um, yeah, that one was very goofy. I'm trying to think. I've been reading the book that I'm reading right now is not necessarily a virtual reality book, but it's called Siberia by Douglas Rushkoff. And he's a social media theorist. And he wrote this, early 2000s. I don't know why I'm obsessed with that, the Y2K period of, media. I think it's really cool. But he wrote that back then about internet culture and kind of this, this other reality of which we exist in, which is obviously, all I talk about. And he relates internet culture to, like, psychedelics and, science and kind of connects the three. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting to read about how some of the greatest thinkers and greatest developers and the people who worked at Google back in the day were also the hippies who were taking psychedelics and thinking about like VR style esque themes and topics. And so while it's not necessarily VR, I do think it's really important to the message of VR. And so I've been connecting and like resonating with that.
that's interesting. Yeah, the I think immediately like the almost the visual aspect of that route can relate almost one for one to VR. There's an interesting guy. Have you heard of Terrence McKenna?
No.
Yeah, so kind of he's a little more like during the 60s, during the I'd say almost the introduction of like LSD mushrooms to the United States. So it was kind of like this huge culture clash, understandably so, because it's like, okay, there's this new substance that people are going crazy on, but also having these profound spiritual experiences. But he also was kind of alive during the time of like the very early days of VR. So I don't even know if the first like head tracking device was made, but it was kind of like in the undergrowths, right? But he had the thought that we're almost seeing manifest today, where it's like the new thing that will be sold and created by artists or creators is almost closer to a memory or an idea. It's almost closer to going into the artist's mind than it is looking through a window or reading through a book. And it's not to say like we're throwing away all the other mediums, but it is like this additional thing where it's like, okay, um, it, the person outside of the individual can now be brought into the individual's mind more so as the tools develop to create those worlds.
Totally. I think imagination has always been something like hugely important to me, just in general. And that is like one of the really cool things about VR is creating these virtual environments that we get to experience. And I think I mentioned before with traveling around in VR chat to these different worlds, you're literally getting a glimpse inside of people's minds, and what's going on in there and what they want to experience, what they have experienced, what they, can come up with. And for me, there's nothing more like raw and amazing than experiencing other people's imagination. And I think, we're kind of coming out of this weird time period in history where we kind of have like stabbed imagination with, a knife over and over again. We're like, no, no, no. You do your 9 to 5, you go, you do this job, whatever, you do your surviving, you get by. And kind of killed, imagination and replaced it with consumption. Instead of creating, we stare at a television, we stare at our phones. And I think VR kind of revitalizes that aspect of creation in us. And we kind of get to set aside working in a traditional way that almost kind of kills, the creative side of our brains. And you can do maybe those more boring tasks kind of in a different way that's stimulating those parts of your mind that are just made to create. And I'm really excited to see that transition because it's something I highly value.
Definitely. There was a book I was reading. It's kind of more on the or it gives a look at like the entertainment side of VR. So the setting is like, okay, the year's I think it's like 2037 or something, but they have this full dive device that most of the world is like consuming media, right? So the AI is sort of established and is able to maintain the economy without really needing the 9 to 5 for the individual. So then you think, okay, I think that's probably pretty likely. Like, well, a lot of the jobs will be able to be replaced, and then we're gonna have like perhaps a large portion of the population that is now being paid by the government, and is sort of left to figure out like what to do with life. So yeah, it's almost like, yeah, we might see this huge split, and I think we almost are seeing this where creators, that it's a little easier to become a creator now and start using these tools to develop stuff. And then the flip side of that is then there's going to be a lot of time for people to consume stuff. I think we saw that with the shutdown across the world that happened,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting to see how people, we love our entertainment, we love our consumption. Um, but at the same time, I do think we are meant to be, creators and doers as people. And so it's really important, I think, to as a person sit down and really really make sure you're doing things that do stimulate your brain and that you aren't just constantly eating and consuming and taking in information, but taking in the information and then recycling it into new ideas and new things. I think it's a very healthy experience for an individual to have.
100%. I'd hope that it'd be almost more accessible to be able to, for an individual to like example go to a college or have access to the world's best professors and learning this stuff right from the home. Yeah, it's exciting.
For sure. I think VR school is a huge thing that's going to eventually, especially because of the shutdown. People are understanding now that the traditional classic education isn't necessarily the most effective or isn't necessarily the way that things need to be anymore. And I hope to see that VR can kind of replace some of that, where you can be in a learning environment and learn things in a more efficient way that's more catered to the individual. Because I think that's a lot of the appeal in things like homeschooling, is because you kind of get this more individualized experience. You get to take the things that you're good at and, kind of run with that. And you don't really get that as much in a public education system, but if you had a more personalized VR system, you wouldn't necessarily have to have your parents teach you, but you could go to school in a digital way and still learn those, get those same benefits that people would get from being homeschooled and stuff. So that's something I'm very huge supporter of.
Yeah, definitely. Like, God, anything would beat sitting in a classroom with like the the bright white light shining down. It's brutal.
Haunts my nightmares.
Yeah. Were you homeschooled?
I was homeschooled until seventh grade. And then my mom kicked me into public school because my whole family is very dyslexic. Um, they didn't realize it with me, but my brother, when he's 3 years younger than me, so when he was, kind of maybe like third or fourth grade, he was really struggling to read and stuff. And my mom decided that she couldn't really take the time to help me do school as well as my little sister who was starting kindergarten. So she decided to focus on my brother and then have me transition in public school, which is a very like, oh god, I can't even explain that. Going from homeschool to public school in middle, in that middle school, age was very, very hard. But I learned a lot, and I'm really thankful that I got to experience both because I can see the flaws in both and the goods in both. I've experienced them both firsthand. So
Yeah, I can't imagine. That's got to be like a huge transition.
it was crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I was also homeschooled from I'd say like third
Mm,
grade to eighth, and then
mm.
the area I'm around had like a sort of a hybrid school, so it was like 1 day a week. But even that, it's like yeah, the kind of seeing the difference between learning in a home environment and at home. There's definitely benefits. The social is a huge one. Being able to actually see your teacher and your fellow classmates.
Totally. I think the face to face is kind of at least in my mind, that was the only real good thing about public school for me was, I think some of my best friends that I have right now, I wouldn't have, got to ever meet them if I hadn't gone to public school. And so I'm really thankful for that. I wouldn't trade it. But I do miss that I didn't really get. I do feel like, in a very simple way, I kind of got stupider when I went to public school. I could feel that I was just repeating the same subject matter over and over again when I could have been developing the things that I was good at a way quicker rate and really been excelling in certain areas that I never got the chance to because I was so busy with busy work. Um, which is kind of a shame, but that's just part of the gig. It's the trade off. You get to have friends, but you don't learn as well. So
Yeah, it's definitely rough. I think we're actually. I might get into conspiracy theories here, so don't judge me too hard. But I think
no,
we're
I
almost.
I'll eat it up.
I would think we're almost in the destruction, not destruction, or the transition of like brick and mortar schools to home stuff, because it is a good point. Like the face to face is one of the main things, and you think like okay, maybe like a decade, 15 years, however long the timeline is, when this what we're doing now becomes completely easy to plug into and is less janky than it is now. It's like okay, then you have this shared thing that a student can enter, and then if they have a good home life, they can exit. Um, Even if they don't have a good home life, though, I would hope that it would be structured in a way that would, yeah, give that opportunity for the individual to start learning on their own. Because it is like the way it's set up. I mean, it's basically made to to create factory workers, like almost
Hmm.
brainwashing to do these repetitive things, not really think for oneself. That's not to say all teachers are like that. I mean, there's the great ones that are keeping the torch alive, but I'm hopeful at least that the foundations for a better education system worldwide are going to be laid by the VR.
Yeah, I really hope so. I really think it's gonna be a much better system for the individual. But like you said, I do think we kind of create factory workers with the way that education is systemized at this given point. And so it is worrying. People aren't taught critical thinking skills. They're taught to be told something and then spit that back out. Um, yeah, it's really sad. It's really sad to see those kind of things being taught. And I really do hope that the VR keeps growing. It keeps, finding its way into education. I think that'll be a huge overall improvement. just for people as a whole to get that experience. I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's kind of naive to expect our single system to be the way that it's going to be forever. I think a lot of people kind of get things in their head where they're like, oh, well, this is the way we know it. This is the best way. This is the way we have to do it. Um, when in reality, things are always changing and they should change, and we should adapt to the changing times, to the changes in technology. And education is no exception to that. That it needs to be changing to follow advancement.
Very well said. I think, yeah, we touched on some deep concepts. This was a really nice conversation.
I agree. I had a very nice time. This is like my favorite thing is talking about all this stuff. So I appreciate you sitting through and being able to carry such a nice conversation with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're one of the creators in the community in the YouTube space that have a really unique voice, and I look forward to seeing more of your content in the future.
Thank you so much. I totally, I'm super honored. Obviously, a big fan of your stuff. So thank you for having me, and I promise I'll do my best. So hopefully you can watch and see me bring kind of my vision to life. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no sweat. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.